Hi. So I basically decided to make a video about mind control and how it's done, who is behind it, and what's the motive for this brutal human rights violation. Mind control, summarized in a few sentences or words, is basically the ability to read the mind and also to influence the thought process. How is it done? Well, let's start with why it's done. Many people would be wondering why they are put into this brutal torture program and can't narrow it down to a single reason. It could be a multitude of reasons. For example, you could have annoyed the authorities or the people responsible for this torture by leaving things like comments on Facebook or Twitter or even YouTube. Those comments could be anything. It could be exposing lies, standing for peace, being against war, being against racism, fascism, being against hypocrisy. So those comments could have caught the attention of the authorities, and basically you would be put into a watch list. This watch list varies, it's got different levels. For example, there could be people who would prioritize you as a serious threat, and then they will increase your level to the upper one. How is it done? Once you're put into a watch list, your emails, your phone conversations, your text messages, all your data goes through the central intelligence agencies that control these programs. So everything you say, everything you do is being watched to a level where even in some cases people are followed 24/7 to find a vulnerable time in their routine where they could be implanted with a microchip. And I know there's a big debate going on about whether this can be done without a microchip or not. They can't do it without microchip. They can send voices to you, for example. They can play voices to anyone, but they can't read the person's mind without a microchip being placed in their brain. So let's get that straight. Okay, how do they plant the microchip in the brain? Well, they have syringes about this long, with needles this long. It's basically essentially like a gun, yeah? So what they do is they put this microchip at one end, and it's got a trigger, and basically they find a place to put it through the nasal cavity. It leaves almost no marks. Maybe some people would have experienced a little bit of blood in their nose or in their throat or in their mouth, wouldn't be able to figure out why it's been done. They knock you unconscious. It could be during a surgery, for example, or it could be done in your home. They could release a gas and unconscious you, or spike your food or drink. They watch you. They can see everything you do. I'll get onto that. So once the microchip is placed in your brain through your nasal cavity by a syringe or a needle, basically you would be observed for a period of maybe 6 months. Everything you think about, everything you do happens in the mind, and it produces an electrical signal. This electrical signal or activity can be recorded. It can be translated into sound. using software. So basically, that is how it's done. Microchip is linked with cell towers. I know people think it's satellites, etc. They can do those things with satellites too, but they can't hit you with directed energy weapons by satellites. I'll explain that as well. So once the chip is linked with cell towers, all your brain activity is basically measured, and every word that you can think of. For example, people can think in different ways. I used to think in images, not words. So they trained me over maybe 4 or 5 years to switch from thinking in terms of an image into words. I was not very vocal, as you want to call it. I used to think in terms of images. If I was thinking about something, for example, let's say going somewhere, I wouldn't talk to myself and say, oh, I'm gonna go get a taxi or a bus and I'm gonna go to central London. That's not how I used to think. I just used to imagine the pictures of what I was gonna do. So I was not verbal. But they train you. They train you over a passage of time, word by word, sentence by sentence. They train you. It's called neuro-linguistic programming. It's done over a vast period of time. It can't be done straight away. It takes a long period of time. So once the chip is installed in your brain, you're linked with cell towers or mobile phone masts. Mobile phone masts are basically microwave emitters. They emit microwave. Their bandwidth starts from, they can operate on 300 megahertz up to 2.4 gigahertz. So they can change the frequency bandwidth with a variety of scales. So once you're linked with cell towers, your mind is observed for a period of maybe 6 months or a year. They don't say anything to you, they just observe you. Everything is observed. All your electrical activity in the brain is read by the microchip, and microchip conveys it to the cell tower, and basically cell towers then pass it on to the operators of this technology, where they use computers and artificial intelligence to change your words into sound. Basically, they hear you like a radio. So that's how mind reading is done. Also, how they play voices in your head. Well, we are electrical or electromagnetic beings. We have evolved over a very long period of time to match the Earth's frequency. The Earth's frequency is 8.93 megahertz. It's called the Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance, every living thing on this planet has evolved to match the Schumann resonance. We have basically, the Earth has a frequency, 8.93 hertz. This 8.93 hertz has allowed all life to evolve matching it. Everything that lives, whether it's plant, whether it's animals, whether it's bacteria, viruses, they all have evolved with this 8.93 megahertz. Basically, once you are microchipped, this electrical activity is monitored. They have screens in front of them. They can have a layer of your thoughts, multitude of your thoughts. People say that they can even see through your eyes. That's not true. They can't see through your eyes, but they can see you. I'll explain how that works as well. So once you're implanted with microchip and observed over a period of time, once they are able to read your thoughts, they can play sounds to you or voices to you. How do they send the voices? Well, the microchip reads your electrical activity in the brain, passes it on to cell towers, and then from cell towers again to computers and artificial intelligence, and it's basically translated into sound, and they can hear it with headphones or speakers or whatever. So they can read your thoughts, and once you've been observed for a long period of time, they can play sounds to you, and those sounds are done matching your frequency. They can direct sounds to you or to anyone. There is no necessity for a chip to receive sounds. They can play sounds via cell towers to anyone. Cell towers emit microwaves, and it's called microwave auditory effect. It's being used to a scale that even if I try my best to explain it, I won't be able to convey it in the best possible way without looking or sounding crazy. It's very, very complicated. But anyway, it's done through cell towers. And how do they hit you with directed energy weapons? As I said, cell towers or mobile phone masts, they emit microwave radiation. And they use 2 or maybe 3 cell towers to pick up a spot in your body. Let's say this is one cell tower and this is another cell tower. This one sends waves in that direction, and that one sends waves in this direction. So imagine when those 2 waves meet together, they make a vector. Vector, I don't know if you've studied physics or not. Vector is basically where 2 different directional waves meet together, and they create heat, which is why you register it as pain or as burns. So they have to use more than 2 towers to cause this. They can't do it with 1. They can probably do it with 1, but usually they use more than 2 towers to be very effective. And how do they know where to send this wave? It's the microchip in your head, most likely head, nowhere else, because it won't be effective. People have been implanted in their hands, people have been implanted in their legs, people have been implanted in their, let's say, back or other places. But the most effective place for a microchip to be is the head, because that picks up electrical activity in the brain and then transfers it to cell towers, and cell towers again transfer it to computers. Artificial intelligence translates it into sound. So that's sorted. Directed energy weapons, cell towers. I'll get onto cell towers now. Well, we know that cell towers are microwave emitters. We have microwave ovens in our homes, in our kitchens. Your home appliance, your home microwave oven, operates on the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. Basically, it sends microwaves to the food or whatever is inside it, and when the microwave is rotating, so it hits different spots, and it's multi-directional. It sends waves in from different directions. That's why it creates friction in the food. This is friction, isn't it? Rubbing the food. So the molecules, the electrons from the microwave hit the food, creating friction, and that's what heats up the food. Well, directed energy weapon is basically the same, and cell towers operate within the same band frequency. Your microwave oven is 800 watts strong. That's a lot, 800 watts. But it doesn't get anywhere closer to the cell towers. Cell towers are basically 300,000 watts strong. That's the minimum. If you see their wires, they are in megawatts. It's not in watts. Their wires are thick. That kind of power supply is not needed for something that operates within the 300 to 400 or to 500 megahertz frequency. They operate on 2.4 gigahertz frequency. It's very, very powerful. Some cell towers are even 1 million to 2 million watts strong. This is top secret, nobody knows about it, but those who know are trying to spread the message. So cell towers are very powerful, and anyone can be targeted with it. I know there is talk of this US diplomats in Cuba being hit with sonic weapons. They don't call it microwave weapons because that will give it away, wouldn't it? They call it sonic weapons, just a rough name so people are confused, but at least there is some blame to put on somebody, Russia or Cuba or whoever is doing it. There are softwares that are made to hack into cell towers. There's many companies that are doing this secretly. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, BAE, many more, I can't remember the names, but there's many private weapon manufacturers that have developed the software to hack into cell towers. So basically, cell towers work as a communication device or a communication transponder and receiver, but they also work as directed energy weapons for the people who have the right kind of tools to access it. Now, people say that they can read your DNA and they can read your electromagnetic frequency and blah blah blah. There's a lot of propaganda, so just to keep you away from the fact, if you experience two-way telepathy, you are implanted with a microchip. That's sorted. I mean, people are confused because they don't have technical knowledge. They can't figure it out for themselves. They are lost in propaganda. There's a lot of propaganda keeping you away from real facts, because if you find out the truth, you might be able to find a solution for it, and if you find a solution for it, you destroy their multi-million pound programs, which they don't want. Okay, so we've covered what is required to read your thoughts. We've covered what is required to hit you with directed energy weapons, and we've also covered who and what sort of companies are behind this. So these private weapon manufacturer companies sell these softwares to whoever bids for it. In the US, it's chaos. In the US, it's very hard to know who's behind your torture. For example, Department of Justice have their own mind control program. FBI have their own mind control program. Department of Homeland Security have their own mind control program. CIA have their own mind control program. Secret Service has their own mind control program. All the different agencies, even some private companies like Lockheed Martin have their own mind control programs. Selection is basically done through observing your data. If you've said something on the internet, which this human right abuse will increase, there's a lot of people with strong opinions, and those people will be targeted one day or another. All right, so we've covered the US, that in US multiple groups and organizations are operating this mind control programs, but in the UK it's not as chaotic. In the UK, Secret Service and secret police, or whatever you want to call it, operate under the guidance of MI5 and MI6. MI5 is basically equivalent to FBI. They are intelligence service operating within the United Kingdom. But MI6, they operate outside the United Kingdom for internationally, abroad. In the UK, the mind control program is overseen by MI5. It's not as chaotic as the US. So they don't allow anyone else to obtain this kind of technology because they fear that it may get out of their control, and they don't want that. It's all about control. It's not about anything else. People are calling it non-consensual human experimentation. That's completely rubbish. These things have been around for ages. We just happen to have not known it. Let me explain why this is not experimentation. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA conducted mind control experiments on vulnerable people, mentally ill, disabled, people suffering from depression, soldiers who had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and many other vulnerable people. These experiments are identical to what we are suffering now, but they have been perfected now. There's no flaw in it at the moment. They can target any point in the body. They can cause death by heart attack. They can cause death by brain hemorrhage. They can cause death by organ failure using cell towers. And I will explain why this is not done via any other means. So this is not experimentation. They experimented these up to 1960s, maximum 1970s. We are in 2017 now. It's over 50 years since these experiments started. Now, they were perfected up to 1970s. In 1970s, in the US, I think it's the Church Committee or something, basically found out that they were conducting these experiments, and there was an outcry, and the government were basically forced to shut it down. They didn't shut it down. They basically pretended that they stopped the experiments. They allegedly burnt all the files of MKUltra, which is the official name for this program at the time, were all supposedly or allegedly burnt, and basically they said they would not do this anymore. But that's rubbish. Instead of stopping the program, they went deep underground and they went global. So it's not an experiment, by the way. These things have been around for ages. Don't be fooled by people calling it non-consensual human experimentation, because these things have been around for over 50 years. It's been deployed since 1980s for control, for elimination, for subverting an individual from their goals. So let's say you pose a threat to the government or the powers that be, and you attracted their attention. They would watch you, observe you, and they would find the moment to put a microchip in you, to control your thoughts, and to subject you to directed energy weapons. So they make you a lesson to others, because nobody would believe you, nobody would understand you. Even if you try to lay it down, which I'm trying to do right now, is going to be confusion, because propaganda has been so effective that not many people can get their heads around it. Okay, so it's not non-consensual human experimentation. Don't call it that. You're not a guinea pig. You're a target. You're more valuable than a guinea pig. They had guinea pigs back in the 1960s and 70s. But since 80s, this has been fully deployed and operational. And it's not done by one agency. It's done by a variety of agencies, by a variety of countries. Let me give you an example of what countries have this mind control program at the moment. All of the NATO countries have mind control program. They include Americas, Canada, European nations, all the EU nations, European Union nations, including Britain, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Spain, Greece, all European nations, they have their own mind control programs, but it's overseen by CIA in those NATO nations, because the funding comes from CIA, and CIA has a vast amount of money. It comes through black projects. Who controls this money basically controls the mind control program. So also countries like nowadays, countries like Pakistan have got hold of this technology. Countries like Iran have got hold of this technology. Countries like Thailand have got hold of this technology. Countries like Malaysia have got hold of this technology. Countries like Singapore, and etc., etc. So once, this used to be just an American thing, but now it's a global thing. Whoever can buy the software, whoever has got the right tools, can basically operate, and there's nobody to stop them. Okay, so we covered cell towers, we covered microchips, we covered who's behind this, what is their motives, and we also covered the purpose. The purpose of this is submission of the target or their elimination. It's as simple as that. It's not experimentation. As I've said to you, this has been going on for decades. Many people have lost their lives. Many people have been killed by this technology. Nobody would ever figure it out that they were done. Celebrities. Hollywood is basically a swamp for mind control. Many of your famous celebrities are in mind control programs, just to get them to submit to the powers that be, whichever agency is responsible for their torture. It's not just in Hollywood. People in the politics. Do you remember George Bush once saying that God had told him to invade Iraq? Well, he may have thought it was God, but there is technology available that can send you voices directly, bypassing your ears and registering in your brain, that can give you any sort of command, and people could think that it was God communicating with them. So the use of this technology is very various. They can use a variety of things on you. In order to read the mind, they need a microchip, that's covered. But in order to receive a voice, which you hear and nobody else, they don't need a microchip. They can send voices to anyone. And I know they're talking about this election thing in the US, that Russia is behind it. Oh, actually Russia. I didn't mention Russia. Russia has its own mind control program. And they are as sophisticated, if not ahead of the NATO nations, because they've been researching it for a very long time. How this microwave torture began, or how this experimentation began, in 1940s, when Germany was defeated, some scientists who were working on microwave weapons under Hitler, they were moved to the United States under the paperclip operation. Hitler used this technology on his people. When he was giving speeches, they would broadcast a certain frequency to the crowds to get them excited. The beginning of this technology, or the start of this technology, happened in Nazi Germany. That's how it spread. During the paperclip operation, the Nazis were moved, Nazi scientists were moved from Europe to the USA, given citizenships, in order for them to pass this knowledge to the Americans. The Nazis started this basically. Hitler was using this technology on crowds in 1930s, 1940s. So it's been around for a long time. It's only coming to the knowledge of the public. Okay, so we covered the beginning of microwave technology by Hitler. We covered the paperclip operation, and we also covered what countries have it. Russia has an equivalent program, maybe even more sophisticated, because Russians invest a lot in these kind of things, and they're quite smart as well. When it comes to weapons, Russia is uh, as well equipped as the US, not less. Everything the US has, Russia has it bigger. That's their motives since the former days of USSR. Russia, China, Singapore, Thailand, Taiwan, Hong Kong. Hong Kong is under China now anyway. Pakistan, Iran, which countries? All the NATO nations, all the European nations, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they all have mind control technology. So it's not uncommon now, it's so widespread. But they don't want to admit it because the involvement of people is on high level. It doesn't just happen that somebody selected and put in a program. They need authority to authorize this. I don't know about other countries, but let me explain how this works in the UK. So once you catch the attention of the authorities in the UK, the authorities, I mean Secret Services, the intelligence agency, once you catch their attention, they have to go to the Home Minister or the Home Office Minister, which nowadays is Boris Johnson, the Wacko joker. So the intelligence agencies goes to a minister to authorize you being implanted. It doesn't just happen. They need authority. They can't just do it to anyone. Not in the UK anyway, but in the US it's more complicated. So the minister authorizes that you should be implanted or whatever. So once you're implanted, then you are basically encouraged to change your life's course so you no longer pose a threat to them and submit to their will, or they will drive you crazy and suicidal. So eventually elimination. Now, minister allowing this will get briefings about you, maybe once a year or twice a year or once a month or whenever. There are people involved on high level here. Well, that's why it doesn't come out. Media in the US and European nations is just a CIA tool. They pay all the well-known journalists huge sums of money to follow the CIA propaganda. If they are trying to gather momentum for a war, you will always see the media encouraging it and blaming the third party. Oh, they have weapons, they are terrorists, they are posing a threat to us, etc., etc., justifying their war. It doesn't happen just on its own. There's a big industry behind this. All the media is a CIA tool. CNN, Fox, CNBC, BBC, Al Jazeera, they're all tools being used. That's why I have personally contacted all the known media outlets. I've contacted CNN, I've contacted Al Jazeera, I've contacted BBC, I've contacted DWTV, Deutsche Welle is German. I've contacted everyone. None of them have got back to me. I even contacted some of the human rights organizations like Amnesty. Amnesty wrote back to me actually saying they're sorry that I am in this situation, but it's not something that they deal with. So they gave me advice for looking into other avenues. I possibly have the emails if I dig it in. People are in their millions in these programs around the world. Millions. It's not in thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. They're in their millions. In the US, I said to you, it's completely chaotic. There's so many people in these programs that even if I try to explain, I won't be able to convey the right kind of message to you. So, this is not non-consensual experimentation. This is target and elimination of a target who has posed a threat to the authorities who see you as a threat. This threat is subject for elimination, which is why they encourage you to suicide. They cause you bodily pains, and they put you through psychological degradation to convince you that life is going to be hell from now and the only escape is death. So how can that be experiment? Physical torture, mental torture, sexual torture, the things that they do to me is beyond words. I don't want to even talk about it. They can do anything to you. As I said, everything happening in our bodies originates at the brain. So copy that brain's signal, or play that brain's signal back to the victim, and the person wouldn't be able to know whether a thought is their own or it's coming from outside. It's very hard. Imagine George Bush going to the Iraq War because God had spoken to him. That's not impossible, is it? You can easily send microwave auditory effect to a person and get them to hear things. Okay, I think I've explained a lot of things. Don't call yourself guinea pigs, because that's an insult to yourself. Guinea pigs were during 1950s and 60s, and since late 70s and beginning of 80s, this has been in full deployment. And it's not just in the US, and it's not just in the UK, it's not just in Europe, it's now in China, Japan, Russia. All countries have their own programs. US is trying, well, Russia tried to get this technology banned. Brezhnev, one of the former USSR or Russian Federation presidents, tried to get the US to stop this technology and get laws that ban it. But US was not interested because they had other goals and motives. So there has been an attempt to ban it in the past. This happened in the 1970s, which is why the US decided to bury this underground and operate on a secret level. Brezhnev, tried to ban it. Now, at the moment, there is no consensus that it should be banned. Everybody's using it to their advantage. Countries like Iran. Imagine when ISIS gets hold of these softwares or technologies. Through cell towers, if you had access to cell towers, you could kill an entire country. An entire country you could kill, and nobody would know who had done it, because it's hard to trace who had access to these programs. Access to cell towers is what they have. They have access to cell towers because companies like BAE, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin have managed a back door to the telecommunication industry, and they can basically use it as directed energy weapons. Satellites. People say it's HARP or it's satellites. Directed energy weapons cannot be HARP or satellites. I'll explain why. HARP, if you've seen their antennas, they face upwards. So HARP is for weather modification. It shoots only upwards. It can't shoot down. It can't. That's how it's designed. But cell towers, they are up and designed to shoot down. So that's why it's cell towers. Also why it's not satellites. Satellites orbit thousands of miles per hour in the orbit. And imagine I'm moving here and there. For a moving satellite, it would be impossible to target this spot specifically. It's impossible for it to lock on. But for something that is ground-based like cell towers, it's easy because the GPS in my head, in my brain, gives the coordinates and they can work out. Also, when I said people talk about being people talk about that they can see through their eyes. They can't do that. There is no technology that can transfer the signal of your eyes. Eyes is an extension of the brain. It's not a separate organ. It's connected to the brain. It's an extension of the brain. Unlike nose or mouth or other organs, eyes is directly linked to the brain. So they can't see through your eyes, but they can see you. When they send the signals from cell towers, the signal goes through everything, even concrete. They can receive that signal back with computers. They can form an image. So they basically can see the target, maybe in X-ray vision or MRI vision or whatever vision. It's not clear to me how they see, but they can see the target. I have no doubt about that. They can't see through your eyes. That's lie. That's propaganda. And also, people say that it can be done without microchips. It can't be. Not this far. And it's not nanotech either. People say it's chemtrails that have nanotechnology in them and we breathe them in. And in order for this to be effective, the chip or the nanobot has to be in the brain. That's the only way they can read your EEG. Anyway, so I've covered a lot. I'll make another video and explain further. Thanks for watching. Stay strong. Stay focused. Don't lose hope. Don't break down. Don't submit. Because you have a duty. One day your children or your grandchildren will ask, you knew about this and you didn't do nothing. Why? Why you didn't do nothing? Because this program is not going to stop at this level. The plan is to have everybody in this program and have everyone controlled. For each person that is under mind control, there are 3 operatives. 3 operatives. So imagine if there is 1,000 victims of mind control. There are 3,000 operatives for every target. Millions of people are employed to torture civilians like you and me. And their numbers are more than us. Every target has 3 operatives. Can't explain to you why I say these things and where I get this information, because that is another subject. But if you have an open mind and are willing to invest time in it, don't take my word for it. Research it. Have a nice day, have a nice evening, and stay strong and don't lose hope. One day we will have this in the open. The only way to get this out in the open is if you bring your activism, like some of the targets are doing in the actual world. For example, we are talking about these things in small circles to other targeted individuals. They already know that we are being targeted. We need to get the common members of the public or the non-targets aboard. Once we get people on board, maybe we have a chance to stop this. But while we keep talking about it to ourselves, forget about it. It's not going to happen. So more demonstrations, more protests, more contacting influential people to get them to come on board. Making videos, writing articles, approaching this the best way I can think of. Don't want to bore you too much. Thanks for watching. Good luck.